It's finally time to write your conclusion. At this point, you have written your introduction, you've written your first body paragraph, has 8 sentences if you are in college prep, and 11 sentences if you're in honors. You have written your second body paragraph, same thing, 8 sentences for college prep, 11 sentences for honors. And basically that means you need 3 pieces of evidence, honors students. And you're now ready for your conclusion. So your directions for this one is write a conclusion to your essay. Your conclusion needs a minimum of 3 sentences, including a restated main claim, a broad statement, and a so what statement. Now, the 3 parts look like this. The restated main claim. Basically, you take your main claim and you restate it using different words. I want you to think of this sentence as a way of transitioning into the final points of your essay. It can also remind the reader what the whole essay was about. Now, you'll see in a minute that my example doesn't exactly restate the main claim. I really do use different words and I say some new ideas. That's a way of summarizing what the essay was about. Then you move into your broad statement. Now this broad statement can be a couple of sentences, it can be one sentence minimum. Sometimes I find it hard to make my broad statement only one sentence just because I have several things to say. So there are several things that you can do here. You know, when we started the introduction, we went from the broad and got down to the point. This time we're starting with our point and we're getting more broad. So first of all, think about your overall paper and you're going to read through it again. Then you're going to relate to your audience in some way. You're going to write 1 or 2 broad sentences, make a statement that would be hard to argue against because you have provided so much proof and evidence within your paper. One tip or suggestion I have that I think makes an essay feel like it's very cohesive, almost like you have a thread of information or an idea that goes all the way from the beginning to the end, is to connect back to the quote at the beginning of your essay. Or if you did something else besides a quote at the beginning of your essay, that you connect back to whatever you did in your introduction in some way. And here is where you make connections to the parts of your essay that relate to that quote and in some way, and then you explain the connection. So I'll show you how I did that in my example. And then the last thing you're going to do is make some kind of universal or so what statement. Basically ask yourself, so what? Who cares? And then turn the answer to those questions into a final statement. So if somebody said, who cares? Why did you even write this whole essay? Your answer to that will be what this final statement is. Basically, you're leaving the reader with a final thought, and that can be very, very powerful, that final thought. I want you to think about what is it that you want them lingering, like the lingering ringing in your ear. Like if you're to ring a bell and you hear that ringing bell for a little while, it kind of keeps going in your mind. That's the final thought that I want you to have in your essay, something powerful. So it can be a statement about human nature. It could be a statement about why some people hold power when others do not, or a statement about what people can learn from the characters in the story, or why your essay or topic or arguments are important in the real world. This isn't necessarily new information, but it should be one of the most interesting or thoughtful statements in your essay. So again, ask yourself, what is the last thing I want my audience thinking about? Okay, and that should be whatever it is for your final statement. So I'm going to pause for a moment. I'm going to write my conclusion, and then I will come back and show you, break down for you what I did. The first thing I did was I went back to the beginning and I looked at what my main claim was. And then I restated it in different words, basically kind of giving an idea of what the whole essay was about, reminding everybody. So I wrote, Slim's power in Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men comes from his ability to defend people who are less privileged than he is lucky to be, and also from an inner strength of his own convictions. Notice that I used Steinbeck's name, I brought up my character again, and I used the title of the book. This is just bringing it back to the fact that we're writing about the character in a book. And then I talked about the two places that his strength comes from, or his privilege or his power comes from. And I explained that here. Very similar to what I did in the introduction. Now, when you go to the broad statement, you are supposed to think about your overall paper. And it says read through it again. I really want you to do that right now. I want you to pause this video and I want you to go read your essay from start to finish. Your broad statement and your universal so what statement will be so much more powerful if you remember everything that you wrote about. Feel free to edit along the way if you'd like, but really the idea here is, what are the thoughts that are popping up in your mind? What are some of the connections that you're making now that you have reread all of your work together? Okay, so pause the video right now and go read your paper. Welcome back. Okay, now time to write the broad statement. So I reread my paper and this is what I came up with. I decided to go ahead like I told you a couple minutes ago when I went over what a broad statement was, is I decided to connect back to the quote at the beginning of my essay. And if you'll remember, I'm going to bring you back to that beginning. My quote said, "Strong people stand for themselves, but stronger people stand for others." So I decided to take portions of that quote and weave it into what I wanted to say. So I'm going to take you all the way back down, and this is what I said. Time and time again, Slim's actions illustrate strength because he can both stand up for himself and stand up for others. I changed this. This was originally themselves, but I changed it to himself because it made more sense with what I was saying. Then I continually used those words of standing up for himself and standing up for others within my commentary here. So I said, he stands up for himself against Curly and advocates for Lenny despite Curly being his boss. He stands up for Candy's dog and is there for George. Slim's continual selfishness is admirable. Readers can learn from his trustworthy and loyal nature. So notice how I brought it back to what the readers can learn. I also made a statement of opinion that I think that his selfless nature is admirable. Notice how I did that without using the word I. I just made it a strong statement. And notice how I used portions of the quote, stands up for himself, stands up for others. And this is a technique when you kind of repeat something 3 times in a row or several times in a row. It's a technique that helps the reader to remember what it is that is your main point. So sometimes actually repetition can be very powerful, and that's what I was trying to go for here. Then my last statement, remember, is what is the last thing I want my audience thinking about? And to me, I feel like Slim teaches a lot about human nature and strength and friendship and what it means to be a loyal person. So what I wrote is the following. The way a person treats another, especially the least among many, should be a measure of worthiness in all relationships, especially close friendships. To me, this is the last thing that I want lingering in someone's mind, because that is what I learned and why I think it's so important to not just read literature, but to learn from other people's relationships. Literature is just a gateway into looking at someone else's relationship and the inner thoughts and workings of a person when you don't know someone. It's sort of an entry point into another world that allows us to understand other perspectives. So altogether, this is what my conclusion sounds like. Slim's power in Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men comes from his ability to defend people who are less privileged than he is lucky to be, and also from an inner strength of his own convictions. Time and time again, Slim's actions illustrate strength because he can both stand up for himself and stand up for others. He stands up for himself against Curly and advocates for Lenny despite Curly being his boss. He stands up for Candy's dog and is there for George. Slim's continual selfishness is admirable. Readers can learn from his trustworthy and loyal nature. The way a person treats another, especially the least among many, should be a measure of worthiness in all relationships, especially close friendships. And that's it. Once you write your conclusion, you are done with filling out the organization of your essay. And as long as you have all of these parts complete, and you've been getting feedback from me along the way, you're ready for the next step, which is transferring this onto a document that will look more like an essay than this currently does, because this just looks like a bunch of boxes with information in it. So we're going to transfer this into an essay. And this is just basically this whole process was just to give you an idea of a different way to approach essay writing that you might not have thought of before. Most people don't think of organizing it quite like this. They just start writing, and then they get kind of stuck at certain points. So I wanted to break it down for you, show you that there's a very successful formula to helping your essay writing go very smoothly and to guide your reader along with your thought process that makes sense for everyone else. So I'm excited to read your final product.